So in 2005, this so-called people power, this was one of the last stages of the so-called Velvet Revolutions in the post-Soviet space. When people now talk about sort of people power in the Middle East, there is a Central Asian politician who has suggested that in fact this phenomenon has started in Kyrgyzstan, and he has used the word ketsin, which is the Kyrgyz word meaning go away, and he has said that ketsinism is now becoming a global phenomenon. What he has essentially meant is that the idea of the ability to say go away to your dictator is a very sort of powerful impulse, which may or may not have started in Central Asia. But what I wanted to talk about also is how getting rid of a dictator is perhaps the easiest part of the whole democratization process, and we saw that very clearly in Kyrgyzstan. And this is again a concern that is being raised now with all the hope that we see in the Middle East, and also some of the dashed hopes that we see in places like Libya and Bahrain. An inconvenient truth, perhaps, is that for a lot of opposition leaders, is that opposing a government is not nearly the same thing as governing. I often liken opposing a government to being a journalist. You get to describe the problem, you get to criticize, but you hardly ever get to solve it. So what happened in Kyrgyzstan, and this is something that happens in societies going through a revolutionary change in history, is that this group of people that's been agitating for a dictator to be overthrown succeeded, arrived in power, and became paralyzed. A few things happened. All of these dictatorial systems in the Middle East and in Central Asia, they survive on corruption. The people in power, it's usually a family. There's a sort of a trickle-down effect of corruption. So everyone, key people are bound to this power center through money, essentially. And so in Kyrgyzstan, when the system collapsed, and this is, again, we read about similar things happening in Egypt with the Mubarak family's money. When the system collapsed, the new leaders, and this is a very populist move that all new governments do when they get into power, started high-profile investigations of corruption. And all kinds of ridiculous things came out, how the son of the president essentially monopolized the fuel supply to the American base, and how another person essentially privatized the most lucrative telecom company. And so the new government unraveled all those corruption schemes. And then another interesting thing happened. The government said, okay, we'll use that. Essentially, what ended up happening is that one leader replaced another leader and repeated all those corruption schemes. And so what he had in Kyrgyzstan, and this is something, again, that people talk about when they talk about the cautionary tales of revolutions, is that getting rid of a dictator does not inevitably lead to a better life. I think it's human nature to expect that when you get rid of something bad, something good will inevitably follow. I think it's true of changing shoes, jobs, girlfriends or boyfriends, and it's also true of changing your government. But what happened in Kyrgyzstan, another problem with opposition movements in this country is that when they come to power, they become incredibly splintered, and because dictators like to keep the opposition splintered and weak. So when all of a sudden they grab the reins of a country, rivalries surface, and inevitably one person comes forward and quiets down everyone else. So in the case of Kyrgyzstan, the new leader essentially tricked everyone else, and these are not my words. These are words of the fellow opposition leaders who elevated this one guy, who then essentially screwed them, and put a few of them in jail, killed some others, including in ways that were pretty gruesome and paled. And completely upstaged the brutalities of the previous regime, which looked sort of intellectually, aloofly autocratic in comparison. For example, there's a journalist, there's an opposition journalist, and that part of the world, journalism, is often affiliated with a political party. This particular person was writing on behalf of a prominent opposition politician, and so he was lured to a neighboring country with the promise of a grant of money for his journalistic enterprise. Now, anyone who has ever had the misfortune of attempting journalism as a career will know that when they dangle a grant in front of you, you go and investigate. And so the person unfortunately bought into it. It was an elaborate chain of emails that lured him into this hotel, into this house in Kazakhstan, the neighboring country. Then he got thrown out of the sixth-floor window and he died. This is just one example of how a leader that came to power on the promise, on this, this incredible hope of democratic awakening, turned into a guy who created a system that would start throwing people out of sixth floor windows.